what you want, when you want it, where you want it. This is The Mesh. Leadership GPS. Insightful conversations about leadership and what it takes to be successful in today's rapidly changing organizations.
Hello and welcome to Leadership GPS. This is The Mesh's ongoing show talking about the world of leadership, both for those people that are already in leadership positions or people looking to grow into leadership positions in the future. I'm Alan Jackson. With me is Tony Jackson. We're the father-son duo with the Jackson Group, a consulting and survey firm located in North Carolina. And then Tony's also with Drive Leadership development program and process for a lot of organizations that he works with as well. How you doing, Dad?
I'm good, son. How you doing, Alan?
Doing great.
I'm glad you distinguish which one is which.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I got to go ahead and make sure everybody can clear. I know we get told a lot that our voices are very similar. Mine is the younger, more crisper, robust, cleaner, and crisper tone, and yours is, well,
richer, more meaningful, and deeper thoughts.
Yours is the other one. Sorry.
Okay.
Well, glad to have you here today. We're going to talk a little bit about meetings. Yeah, let me just kind of, everybody rolls their eyes when we start talking about meetings, team meetings, department meetings, staff meetings, whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. We are going to talk about meetings. We're going to talk about, from a leadership perspective, what we need to keep in mind, some of the do's and don'ts, some of the effective measures of leading well when people meet together. But before we do that, let me introduce, or not introduce, but remind you what our sponsor is for this month. We do have a sponsor for our show. We're very thankful and grateful for their support. Pinecrest Independent Living Community here in Hickory, North Carolina. Just a wonderful facility, all the comforts of home for their residents. We've had some opportunities to go out there and visit and tour this place. Great facility, great amenities. They use the slogan, live the life you deserve. And I think the fact that it is such an independent facility with live-in managers, but they have really afford their residents a lot of great amenities and things that they can take part in that make the place stand out from others.
I've been there as well, Alan. That's a great place. I tell you, and I hate to say that I'm of that age, but I am, getting on up there, as you so rarely tell people. But the thing is that you start looking at places like that and saying, would I want to spend those years of my life where I still want independence and I still want freedom of choice,
sure,
but yet I want a sure environment.
There you go.
And you know what? This is a classy place. Those people do it right. There's no doubt about it. I walked in there and people were smiling. The residents were smiling, a lot of interaction, and yet rooms were great, and the apartments were phenomenal, and everything was up class. It really was.
Great. Well, Pinecrest Independent Living Community, definitely check them out online. There'll be a commercial a little bit later in the show you can listen to as well. Live the life you deserve at Pinecrest. So, but Dad, back to our main topic, and we are talking about leading well when people meet.
Yeah.
Meetings are we all meet. Even the organizations that say they don't like to have meetings still have meetings.
Which is every organization.
Exactly. Every organization says we try to minimize our meetings. We're going to be more efficient with our communications, and they still end up meeting on a routine basis.
What's the Listerine syndrome? You know that, right?
Oh, how was that?
You hate it, but you use it twice a day.
Okay, sure.
We hate something, but we use it, and we do it. And you're right. Every organization meets, and yet every organization says, I wish I didn't have to, or so many meetings, or
that's right,
complaining about meetings. So,
some of the employee satisfaction surveys we do and some healthcare organizations where we survey, one in particular, we just started asking a question of which of the following is the most effective means of communication throughout the organization. And, a lot of people I talked to in the office or other people when we were planning the survey said, I'm sure email is going to be at the top. Now, email was pretty high on the list for most people, but meetings and face-to-face communications always popped in those top two. So it's one of those things where, yes, you may say that you wish you didn't have as many meetings, but at the end of the day, what's a good, effective way to get information across? It's a meeting.
Well, let's face it, and I'll be honest with you, I facilitated a focus group last night at a local university, all right? And it's part of their strategic planning process. And one of the things in this community focus group was trying to get ideas about what do we see for this Lenoir University, great school, for the future. And people were bringing up, so what about distant learning? What about detached learning? People out there that don't show up on campus and all that sort of stuff. Aren't you going into that? Aren't you going to do more of that? And you know what? There's still a mixed bag on that. And the main driver why there's some reluctance to do that in any organization is because you lose that face-to-face, eye-to-eye contact and interactive contact. Even though people say, you can do that online as well. So you can't read a face,
Not as easily.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. Well, staff can be very critical of the meetings. We still have them. They're still very effective and a useful way of communication. But I guarantee most of the staff that roll their eyes and think negatively about staff meetings are because they're thinking about those meetings that they've been in where the person running the meeting, the leader up there, either didn't know what they were doing, did not know how to keep everybody's attention, did not communicate effectively. Those are the ones that have probably left that bad taste in those employees' mouths as far as meetings go. So what we want to do, or at least what I want to do today, and I know I'm kind of going to spring this on you a little bit. I told you ahead of time.
That very much.
I know. I told you no prep on this. I've got some things to run by you. I'm going to talk about some different aspects of meetings, either some different particulars or different do's or don'ts or items that should a leader do this, or what should a leader do in this situation? And I just want you to respond. Tell me what you think about the do's and the don'ts side of things from the logistics standpoint, how this works. And let's see where we go with this. Hopefully we can share some good information for those of you that are needing to plan or run a meeting. And it's something where you're going to be talking to your team or group, sharing some piece of information. What are some of the logistics around that to make that just as possibly effective as possible?
Okay, I'm game for this, but just understand, you do too much of this, Alan, springing things on me at 65-year-old. I'm going to be over there at Pinecrest before you know it, okay? Looking for a safe haven.
Well, I'm just going to try
we
to
like
keep you
predictability. We don't
I try to just keep you on your toes here.
Okay.
So let's see where we go with this. All right. So first off, I am a leader in an organization. I'm a manager, a team leader, whatever it may be. And I'm getting ready to set up a meeting.
Like a regular staff meeting? Let's assume that. Can we assume that for a minute?
Let's make this a regular staff
meeting. That's the most
meeting.
common.
How about let's do this? Let's say
Monthly
you're a
staff
brand
meeting.
new leader in a department and you're getting ready to set up how the department staff meetings are going to run on a regular basis.
Okay.
All right?
All right.
First thing, and this may seem kind of a minor point, but you got any suggestions on if I'm trying to figure out when in the course of the day, time of the day, do you think is the most effective for people to have meetings?
That would be a 0 time frame. All right?
Okay.
There's hardly ever a great time.
All right.
But the contention there is that based on what is the nature of the work of the department. Mm-hmm. If it's in a hospital and you're caring for patients and changing shifts at 7 o'clock, you don't want to have a total staff meeting at 7:30. You're taking care of patients at that point in time, shift changing and everything else. So you're looking at later in the morning. Mm-hmm. All right. Plus you got the whole element of, do you have multi-shift operations? Mm-hmm. So what's the best time? I've always said, take the meetings to the people at the most convenient time for most of the people. It's never going to be perfect. Okay.
But what if I'm more of as the guy setting up the meeting, I'm more of a late afternoon guy. I like my 4 o'clock meetings. 4 to 5 is the last thing of the day. I can get it out of the way. I mean, why not?
Then I think how they come across will be exactly that. Mm-hmm. He wants to get this over with and out of here.
Okay.
All right. It's a convenience. That shouldn't be. The workload should be the one that dictates whether or not the timing of the meeting fits or not, okay? And where have people spend their time.
So what you're telling me is, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, but again, remember there's, in a lot of workplaces these days, you got a lot of flexibility, how people arrange their time and their work schedules and everything else. Mm-hmm. So what you really want to do is simply say, look, we're going to start having this staff meeting, total staff meeting at such and such time for so length of time on these days every month, okay? Right? So you set some predictability.
Sure.
It's more important to say there's predictability rather than the ideal time, because people can work their schedules around that.
Sure.
All right. In our company, you know what we do. We have every Monday morning a meeting, and you made some wonderful changes in that meeting structure. I'm sure we'll touch on later on. But whether you hold people in a stand-up meeting, focus meeting, briefing meeting for 15 minutes and out of there, or whether it's a 2-hour sit-down meeting, get into it, let's discuss it type of thing,
right,
dictates how long that meeting would be. But what people need to know is we value meeting, and that will take place once a month on this schedule.
Sure.
Okay.
Do you recommend when trying to find that ideal time or day of the week, do you put it out in a group conversation and say, everybody, I want to hear feedback on what you think the best time or date would be?
If you're that new manager, I'm sorry, go ahead. You started.
Or do you just say you research and find out based on work schedules and all that what's going to be the best time and just set the time and make everybody work around that?
No, I think it's always better to get participation on something, but understand that you're talking probably a majority vote here rather than everybody being happy with the meeting time.
Okay. So find the time that's maybe the best fit for the most people, realizing some people are going to need to work around their schedule and change it up, but you're trying to meet the most people at the middle ground there.
And we haven't talked about this, but there's one thing I'm kind of compelled to say at this time. If you're setting up a regularly scheduled meeting every month, it's announced, decided upon by group input as well, the best you can. Know full well that you're never going to have full participation, probably.
Sure.
You got people traveling on the road. You got people who are absent and ill. You got people who are late coming in for whatever reasons, whose work schedules don't match, whatever. So you always have to build in a well-known, anticipated, planful way to close the gap for those people who weren't there. because it's always going to be the case.
Sure.
And I guarantee it's those people who aren't attending those meetings who will simply say, I never got the word. When did we do that? So unless we backfill that information gap for them through a structured way, and that might be assigning it to somebody in the meeting, say, would you get with Alan and bring him up to date on this? Or here are some talking notes that you covered. And say, get that in the hands of the person.
So make sure it's closing the loop, those people that don't attend.
That's right.
And there again, it's not penalizing the people that don't attend. If they're not attending because of work-related things that they're tackling, there's projects that they're on call for or working towards or whatever it may be. Let's not penalize them by saying, well, I'm sorry, if you weren't there, you're kind of out of the loop. With that guilt trip of, well, sorry, you need to make it to the meetings. It's understanding as long as they're not away for personal reasons or completely unrelated reasons.
Or just choosing not to be there.
That's right. Then make it a little more important for them to follow up on their own and find out what happened.
Well, in just about every one of our employee surveys that we conduct through the Jackson Group and Drive Leadership, we ask people, does your department have regularly scheduled staff meetings? Yes, no, or unsure.
Yep.
We feel really good when everybody says, yes, we do.
Sure.
And then if that's the answer, then we drill down and say, well, how productive are these meetings for positive communications? And we staircase down and try to discern if they are or aren't and reasons for that, in either direction. What amazes me all the time, first of all, and what depresses me, are departments that says, no, we don't.
Yeah, sure.
And you know what? Those are the same departments that have low scores on every other element of that we're testing out in the workplace.
Absolutely.
Because they're driven by communications or the gaps in it. What's amazing to me, though, is how many times we have people say, I don't know.
I don't know
whether we do or not.
I'm unsure if we have department staff.
That's exactly right, on a regular schedule basis. And what that means is either there's no certainty about it or there's no required attendance, so they don't know what they're missing.
Yep.
You don't know what you don't know.
Sure.
It's amazing to me.
Yeah,
and yet
really
we miss a wonderful opportunity to get people the word. We know that communication is critically important in the workplace. We know that's the biggest bugaboo and sticks in people's craw about being dissatisfied with nobody tells me anything. I don't know. I just work here.
Yep.
You're not engaging people if you're not communicating with them. All right.
So setting the time of the meeting, there's no perfect time for it, obviously. It's going to vary from organization to organization and type of department or type of work group to others. But working with your team, find the best time that's going to get the best participation, the most agreement on it without, being able to please everybody, we understand. And then making sure we're closing the loop on those people who are not able to attend the meetings for whatever reason.
Absolutely.
So everybody still gets the same message, even if they don't hit the 9 a.m. Monday morning meeting. So,
and again, it's based on the nature of the work being done. You and I have a friend, close friend, Major Scott Coffey, who's in the service, has been almost 20 years now. And Scott's a major, Well, by golly, he's going to hold meetings when he says there's going to be a meeting.
Sure.
But they're military folks. They're going to show up.
Yep.
Because that's a protocol. Okay.
Right.
And and when you get in there, I would guarantee they're probably not open discussion meetings. Like, gentlemen, we're deploying overseas, going to war. Let's see a show of hands in favor.
Is everybody okay with that?
We don't do that. So I'm sure we'll get into the tone of the meeting and how that's done in terms of a few minutes.
Let's brainstorm when the best time might be to do this.
So it's one of those things where Scott has a luxury a lot of people don't have. Says, gentlemen, we have a meeting scheduled for 0800 at such and such.
Sure.
Show up. And they know they'll be there.
Right.
Not everybody has that luxury.
Yeah, we can't pull that off in a lot of other organizations.
That's right. So the best you can do is set it routinely, regularly, make excuses and fully communicate when it's not going to occur. Close the gaps with those who can't attend for legitimate reasons, but hold people accountable for attending because communication is so important.
All right. Well, tying off of the whole communication, especially even with closing the loop, this is kind of related to that. Providing an agenda ahead of time to the meeting. Yes or no?
Yes or no. Is it best to do? Yes or no? Is it practical to do?
Or is it a it depends situation? So if you're there again, let's put yourself in the shoes of I'm a leader just brought onto a new organization. I've got a team now, and I'm trying to set up a protocol and a process for how we're going to do our meetings. Do I need to be informing that team ahead of time before they get into the meeting exactly what we're going to be talking about and all the items, or do I need them to be coming in with an open mind on things?
Now, either of those can sound inviting, right?
Sure.
Open mind or thinking
or more
through
structured
things right?
and getting prepped.
But think about it this way.
Yeah.
What you want is productivity out of meetings, okay? And if the first 10 minutes of a meeting is spent bringing people up to speed, announcing to them what we're going to be talking about and so on and so forth, and then getting their minds geared up to contribute and all that, you've lost 10 minutes of productive time. So I am totally in favor of but preordaining the topic for the meeting and inviting people to think about that, come in ready to discuss or whatever it might be. Now, obviously, we're going to find out in a few minutes that there's meetings that you do nothing but downward communications. Announce, direct, clarify,
Sure.
ask for a response, and get out of there. That's fine. But if you're wanting people to come in prepared to discuss, contribute, and pay attention and manage your attention, I would send them an email in advance of the meeting and simply saying, at our regularly scheduled meeting at such and such time, repeat it because a lot of people forget things. Here's the 3 topics that we're going to focus on, and what you need is some background information is this, this, and this.
Okay.
Now, the problem with doing that is it takes time for the leader to do that in advance.
Sure.
Plus a good memory to remember to do that, not just 5 minutes before people walk in the room.
Right.
You didn't get the memo? I sent it 5 minutes ago. So if there's going to be the need to communicate in advance, which I think there is, all it is an honorable way of simply saying, I want you to be as prepared for this meeting as you possibly can so we won't waste each other's time.
Well, I think you hit on a good example there where there's things that it was helpful for them to know and realize before coming into the meeting, so it saves time from having to give all the background. I think a kind of a agenda or at least bulleted items, what's going to be discussed in the meeting is really good. Where I could see there being a concern is if you really want them to come in with an open mind and fresh-minded about a topic, instead of going ahead and giving them 3-4 days to start prepping all their notes and thoughts and all this other information, there's good and bad with both of that. Sometimes you want them to come in with the idea. Sometimes you don't want them to come in having already written out pages and pages of all the notes they're going to make sure they say in that meeting. So with that.
Well, I do that even on a consulting basis with individual leaders. I do a lot of individual leadership consultations. And I take notes after each meeting, never during the meeting, but I summarize my thoughts, my impressions, what I've heard that person say afterwards. Before my next meeting with them, which might be 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks down the road, I send that person a personal email saying, thanks for our last time together. Here's what we talked about then. Here were some decisions made. Here's where we're going to pick up this coming meeting. It's this time and place acceptable to you, and so on and so forth. All right. Why? Because there's a lot of other clutter in people's minds all the time in their jobs. And to isolate and help them focus on something is a real advantage. It's creating some managing of attention of people. And if you can do that in advance of a meeting, you save time in the meeting.
Okay, so let's say I've got an example where I decide, it's important for me to send out a kind of an agenda for the meeting before we meet.
An agenda?
Yeah, an agenda a few days in advance. Make sure people know what we're going to talk about. So agenda item number 1 is introduction. That's going to be from 12 to 12:03. Then from 12:03 to 12:08, I'm going to recap the objectives of the meeting and also have all those times listed out.
Okay, you can stop now because this is painful. This is painful here. Okay.
All right. Tell me why not to do that.
I know of a CEO in a hospital environment that we worked with one time that he was probably a very efficient, very time-honored administrator, but he was so structured in his meetings that he did the same thing. He didn't send out an announcement in advance, but everybody knew when he calls on you to contribute from your department's activity, you got 3 minutes. And if you went over 3 minutes by 2 seconds, he cut you off in mid-sentence.
Wow.
Thank you, Alan. Sit down. Next, you got 3 minutes.
Ooh.
Now, that promotes paranoia.
Oh, yeah.
That promotes fear. That promotes tenseness in the meetings. Don't know what's okay to say and not to say. So too rigid, an agenda like that is for the birds. Okay?
Okay.
So what you do is a topical content.
Right.
Or agenda. Here's the 3 things we're going to discuss. Boom.
Now, on that same note, though.
Okay.
So let's say we've got those 3 topic items.
Okay, but I'm right. Just as we go forward.
You're mostly right. 60-minute meeting, 3 topic areas. So in your head, you may be thinking, well, we'll probably spend 15, 20 minutes on each topic or so.
Okay.
It gets to be 15, 20 minutes. You're still knee deep in topic 1 because everybody's channeling in questions and ideas and thoughts.
Okay.
And it's going way past what you already know in your head. Boy, if I'm going to get to those 2 other topics, there's no way I can do it.
All right. Here's where you shine as a leader.
Okay.
If you've committed, and that's one of the things we didn't say, but meetings should be committed to a certain time frame. This is a 1-hour meeting, folks. Yeah. Every time we meet, it's a 1-hour meeting. Okay. Not to say that 59 minutes and 59 seconds, I'm going to cut everything off in midstream.
Sure.
But we plan for that. It's kind of like sitting through a sermon at church. Those people who still go to church. How long is a sermon supposed to last, Alan?
15 minutes?
15 to 20, sure.
20 minutes
we're Lutheran, so yeah, that's pretty right. If Baptist maybe
sometimes they get by with 8 to 12, but it just depends. So, right.
Well, the fact is, I guarantee you, what happens in meetings, everybody knows kind of what's the expected time that we usually meet without being told this is a 1-hour meeting or whatever, or we've got up to 1 hour if we need it. People start, in their mind, their body starts telling them, okay, this is going on too long, and they start tuning out. Yeah. Okay? So they're going to be just as tuned in to the fact that, hey, we've only talked about one of these 3 things, and we're almost at the end of our meeting time. And they should not expect you just to do the evergreen meeting, which it goes on and on and on.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
But the good leader in you is going to be monitoring that group and that discussion, which you don't want to cut off because it's good discussion at that point on one topic out of the three. That's when you have to say, folks, you know what? This is great. This is a good meeting. We really done justice to this one topic. And we announced that we would be talking about two others. We can't today. Not in on our commitments to you about time on the job. So we're going to defer these other two to the next meeting.
Okay.
Boom. There you go.
There you go. You've let them know that you're cognizant of the time. You're not just letting things slip out of control.
Absolutely.
But you're also showing that if people are willing to talk about a topic and have a lot of things to say about it, you don't want to discourage that.
Sure.
Fair enough.
And I understand what you're saying. Again, I'll go back to my facilitation of that focus group last night. We had an hour and a half. We had a 90-minute window of time that we could accomplish this in. Very small group to work with. And I thought going into it, I said, this would be a breeze. I'll knock this out in 30 minutes. We took an hour and a half.
Wow.
But what I tried to do with 20 minutes left to go in that hour and a half, and I was monitoring the clock, I started preparing people to wind down. And I would say things like, this has been great discussions. We've talked about two of these three things we were going to talk about. We've got one more we do need to give a little bit of lip service to.
Sure.
Because my commitment is to you to be out of here by 8:30 tonight.
Right.
And you know what, by golly, we got out of there at 8:30 on time, which they appreciated, and yet we had touched on at least the things that we said we were going to do.
Okay.
So that's the other side of it. You monitor as you go through and not rigidly say, okay, 20 minutes are over, and now we jump to topics. But monitor as you go along.
So it's having a structure in mind is a good thing. Having some general lay of the land when it comes to the meeting, what you're wanting to get accomplished, but being flexible enough to realize that if something requires more attention and time with the discussion, knowing what items on your agenda you could push off and move to another meeting and be okay with.
Yeah, you defer
so
it.
you're being flexible. You're
Defer
kind
it or
of going
redirect
with
it. Absolutely.
But at the same time, it's not letting anybody in the meeting think, well, he's completely lost control. We've been talking for an hour and we haven't even got to items 2 and 3.
Yep.
You still need to keep everybody understanding what you're going to do with items 2 and 3.
Let me tell you a creative thing to do, and this is an ad hoc, and it's a strategy for employee engagement and employee involvement. Remember, these are employees, not managers or supervisors in your meetings for the most part. Okay? It's a supervisor meeting. Suppose that you had 3 topics, you did justice and good justice to 2 of the 3, and you got one more that's really what I want to talk about, but you're not going to go over your time limit with the people and honor their time and everything else. Plus, you don't want to lose them because their mind will start clicking off.
Sure.
Okay?
Right.
At that 61st minute, if it's an hour meeting. So what you do, you could creatively, if that third topic area, say, folks, we haven't gotten to this third area, which I think is critical. So we're going to make that the first discussion issue of next time that we meet together, which would be 1 month from this, and our date would be such and such.
Sure.
For another 1 hour meeting. But you know what? In advance, Susie, Tom, George, why don't the 3 of you get your heads together and talk about this third topic area as though you were in a meeting, take some notes, and then we'll send it out a week in advance of our meeting together so that everybody comes in with a head start on that topic.
So it's really maximizing your time during the next meeting on that topic.
But it's also bringing 3 people into a stronger level of engagement in the workplace because they're the ones saying, we're kind of speaking for everybody.
Okay.
Here's a starting point. And gives them a meaningful part to play. It's creative. It's not a hot type of thing. It's smart, I think, but it's rarely done.
Yeah, sure. Most of the time, it's pretty much the person up front going through the list, getting stuff, and then after it's all done, okay, great meeting, guys, thanks a lot, and nobody's engaged in any higher level after that meeting.
See, I think we're not close to drawing a punctuation mark on this discussion, Alan, but if we keep in mind that when we've asked people to devote part of their time to meet with other people, including us, we need to make that pretty meaningful time. Mm-hmm. We need to make it productive time, but meaningful, not just efficient, all right, but meaningful time. Now, they should walk out of there knowing something different, feeling something different, understanding something different than they had before they came in.
Sure.
All right?
Right.
So if you think about it in that term, and we used that model a minute ago about getting more engaged and so on and so forth, it gives you every opportunity when Tom, Dick, and Harry, whoever it was I nominated a minute ago, come back in the next meeting, they give their little summarization and say, what were your thoughts about this? Start us off. Start a discussion on this about what y'all talked about. Bring it in, then you can applaud that. You can, set the tone for it and say, great job, guys. That's right on topic, and everybody else chimes in right away. So there's group synergy being developed by that as well. The fact is that, when you have that meeting time, just remember that meetings are a good social exchange time as well as information transfer time.
Sure.
Social exchange and information transfer.
Yep.
That happens all the time. I went into an organization one time, a long time ago, when I first started my practice, and I promised them that I could save them 35% of their time in meetings, and therefore be a more efficient organization by monitoring and doing a meetings audit and make recommendations about how to change it. I promised them that.
Okay.
The first CEO I talked to, he said, well, I don't think we want to do that. I said, you don't want to be more efficient? You don't want to save that time and money? He said, I didn't say that. He said, but I don't want to give up meetings. He said, meetings are very productive for people working well together. He said, I guarantee you, more dialogue goes on between team members walking from their workstation to the meeting site and back out of the meeting than ever that we have sitting in a meeting. So I'm not willing to take away that social exchange time between people.
Sure.
Never thought about it before.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Very good point. Okay, I've got my third item here to ask you about. And this is may also seem like a very trivial thing, but I think there's some value to it. You, the leader, running the meeting, are you sitting or standing?
Depends on the size of the group and the topic or the things you're trying to accomplish.
Okay.
All right. If this is a pronounce, direct, and then have them respond type of meeting, here's what you need to know. All right. Announcements and updates and do this. You stand.
Okay.
With your group. Why? Because it says, this is going to be brief, folks. This is to the point. Okay, that's what it communicates. If you sit down, it's almost like sitting down in the den with somebody. Well, let's talk.
Right. Yeah.
And the emphasis is, well, it's more casual, so we talk. Now, you might say, well, what if there's only 3 people in the meeting plus that? But if that's your intent, let it guide your posture, if you would. Okay?
All right.
Direct, candid, down on communication, sure. Stand, get it over with, get it done, get out of there. Okay? Don't invite lolling around by sitting down at the table with them.
Sure.
If it's a discussion meeting,
right,
in your idea generation, or we need to talk about such and such, sit down.
Okay.
Because otherwise it's lording over and you're directing.
Well, I was going to say, I think there's a little bit of the visual cue of, are you there in that meeting to exert authority, or are you there in that meeting to let them talk and get the ideas? And if that's the case, I agree. You sit down at their level and be at the table with them, so that you're saying their input is just as valuable as yours in this process.
Yep.
But, if you're announcing cutbacks or announcing something a little more dramatic, I think you need to be up there standing.
Or if you've got a large audience, if you got 40 people in the room and you need to be visible to the group, stand up and move around. You never just stand and stand.
Well, let me ask though, what's the implication if somebody chooses to sit in a large group session, large team meeting, when it's meant to be very directional information and maybe even a little more serious information? What's the implication the staff gets from that?
Lack of sincerity about the message.
Yeah.
First of all, I say this is important. It's affecting everybody, but I'm sitting down and I'm casual about it.
I'm slouched down in my chair.
The second thing is I can't have eye contact with each of you because it's easy for that person 5 rows back to hide behind Susie and just not make eye contact, and therefore it loses some of the meat of the message. Yeah. Okay?
I think standing up in front of a large group, you're basically saying, I want to be visible. I want to make sure I can look everybody in the eye if you guys are looking at me as well.
Well, but there's another advantage to standing with a large group, but only if you also move. If you're static, if you're a stander, that's a snoozer, all right?
Okay.
It minimizes the effect of the messages that you're communicating. You stand, and particularly if you punctuate it by having monotone voice where you read out things to people, or you're reading from a script from people, or we've got 5 more minutes to do such and all of a sudden people say, please, dear God, let me get out of this thing. All right.
Right.
It becomes an endurance test for people rather than a learning session or meeting.
Sure.
So if you're going to stand in a large group, move. The reason you move is to draw the center of attention to different focal points in the room, meaning different people. It's easier for people in the back row to feel like this is a safe place because he can't call on me back here because he can't see me.
Right, sure.
But if I move around, I see them, I can call on them, I can get their input, I can look at them, and I'm talking to you at that point in time.
Everybody knows to kind of come into the meeting alert and ready to respond and be a part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you have to be mindful of your body. And what your body and your facial looks and your hand gestures and everything else say to people when you're meeting as a leader.
Well, plus, I would think too, with the hand gestures and the facial expressions, you're going to be more expressive when standing than you would be sitting. Sitting, automatically half your body
it closes
is kind of getting a little closed off. So you may be very expressive with your hands. But it's always going to be a little more limited, and it's going to be harder for everybody to see.
Absolutely.
Up in front, visible, you've got more space. You can be more in motion.
Animated, yeah.
More animated, but also everybody can see you no matter where you are in the room.
Well, it gives much more opportunity to emphasize your message at the right ways and the right points and with the right people.
Now, I will say on the sitting side, the times I like to sit in a meeting is when I am there to help facilitate the meeting, but I'm not the one doing the talking all the time. I'm not the one calling the shots on the meeting. I may be saying, well, we're going to turn it over to this person to give us a report here. Then we're going to let this person give us a report. Smaller group sessions like that where we can all sit around the table, look at each other in the eye. And I'm not the one that needs to be the center of attention. I'm fine sitting and being within the group on that.
I would venture to say in most modern organizations, a leader's role is in meetings is much more so as a facilitator than as a director of that meeting. All right.
So facilitator is good for sitting in some of those smaller group sessions.
Well, last night at the focus group, I stood.
Sure.
But there were only 7 people in the room. Very small group. It was a rainy night, end of a holiday and all sorts of stuff. So we expected 40 some. So 7 showed up. But it's still obviously a dynamic session.
I'm sure it was.
But I stood up. Yeah. Why? Because as a facilitator, it's never about you anyway.
Right.
It's about discussion and contribution.
Well, I think from a facilitator standpoint, you've got more flexibility to go and point to people, call on people, say, I see you've got something there. I think the sitting is more of other people already know what their role in the meeting is, and they're already planning on talking and giving reports and updates.
That's right.
You don't want to call any attention away from them. You'd like for them to be the ones that people pay attention to.
Yep.
You minimize your role a little bit. You just be the one that keeps the meeting going on the right pace.
Announcing type of meetings, structured, static meetings is about me and the message.
Okay.
Dialogue, idea generation sessions, problem solving sessions, discussion meetings is all about you. So my job shifts from directing communications and being the communicator to facilitating that message. All right. Okay. Now, people make a big mistake with it, and you did a minute ago when you talk about facilitating a meeting. Right? You're not really facilitating a meeting. Facilitation means making something easier.
Okay.
Right?
All right.
And you're not making a meeting easier. That's a little weird. What you are facilitating is dialogue.
Okay.
You're making dialogue easier for people.
Making dialogue
flows
easier.
That's right.
Got it.
Yeah. Okay.
Great. Well, we're going to take a really quick break. When we come back, I've got 2 or 3 more items to fire off, and we'll see where we go from there. But again, we're talking about leading well when people meet here on Leadership GPS. We'll be back in just a moment.
Don't wait another minute to start living the carefree retirement lifestyle you've always imagined. Come tour the Pinecrest Independent Senior Living Community in Hickory, North Carolina, and discover all we have to offer. From live-in managers to daily social activities and events to amazing chef-prepared meals, Pinecrest is unique. We'd love to show you more. Contact us at 828-325-4795. Retirement is about new beginnings, and the time to begin is now.
Hello and welcome back to Leadership GPS. This is Alan Jackson along with Tony Jackson with the Jackson Group and with Drive Leadership as we're talking about leading well when people meet. So you've gotten a group together, you're a department leader or manager, you're holding a department staff meeting or you're setting up a process for that. What are some do's and don'ts, things you need to keep in mind with that? You heard just a moment ago from our sponsor, Pinecrest Independent Living Community. Again, special thanks to them for helping sponsor this episode.
Great organization.
Yeah. So, Dad, we've already gone through talking about timing of the meeting, talking about the agenda, whether you promote that in advance or not, then the whole standing and sitting and how we handle that. Let's talk a little on the more technical side of things. Some people really, really love their PowerPoints. Some people really love using slides. Some people can't stand them.
Yep.
Where, when is it a good tool? Does it depend on the situation? Are there some situations where you definitely want to use it, others where you definitely don't want to use it? Where do you stand on all this?
Yes, and yes.
Okay, good. Right. Moving on to the next one then. Hope everybody got that okay.
So, remember the key about PowerPoint, about slides. You remember slides? We used to have transparency.
Those little clear sheet things
right.
that, I remember those.
Or stone tablets, things like that.
That's right,
anything that's written and held up in front of people in any way, electronically or not, is a technique for managing attention.
Okay.
If you're good at managing attention as a person, your style helps manage attention by tone of voice and by emphasis and eye contact and how we portray the message and all that. You may not have to use that.
Okay.
The more information there is to communicate to people probably needs to be supported by something that they can get their eyes on and even hands on. I won't say I'm in favor or disfavor of PowerPoint. I happen to be okay with PowerPoint.
Sure.
But sometimes people overuse it.
Yes.
When we end up having a PowerPoint that says everything you're intending to say to people, so all you do is read that to them. You read that to people, forget it. Don't do it. Use bullet points and nothing else.
Yes.
Right? Give them the boom, 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 and then you elaborate and talk with people.
I've been through so many training sessions I go to, And it's just, just give me the slides afterwards.
Yep.
You just saved me an hour not having to listen to you talk because every single word you said is right there on that slide.
That's exactly right.
It's frustrating.
It should be a prompter. It should be kind of a bullet point reminder. It should be a teaser.
Yep.
Okay. Put up teasing words or put up something that's a question mark beside it and say, let's talk about this. And, the focus on a meeting is always about dialogue.
Well, and I think too, I think there's a lot of pressure on people out there to say, oh, you don't have slides. You're not going to show a presentation.
Sure. Yeah.
How are you going to do that? And I think you're exactly right. There's so many times where if you are a good enough speaker, you're dynamic enough and you've got some good things to share, don't sweat the PowerPoint thing. If you can keep their attention and keep things moving and show the right level of enthusiasm and remember all the details to share, if there are details to share, I say go without it. I'm really trying to minimize it in my own life. When I use a PowerPoint presentation, it's to call out certain key phrases, keywords, or if I have to show data and numbers and specifics.
Something that has to draw their attention.
That's right. Something where, I don't want them just to hear me say, you got a score of a 79.6, and that went up 2.3% from last year compared to our database of 74.2. That's perfect for PowerPoint. You're calling attention to numbers and figures and specifics.
I like people using PowerPoint as an outliner and as a prompter for discussion. Yeah. I love to use when I'm doing public presentations to conferences and things like that, 3 or 4 slides, 4 slides, 5 slides. One might say the topic for what we're going to talk about. The next one might show 4 bullet points. Yep. Kind of the key things we want to talk about. And that's where I'm going to leave it on the screen as we talk.
Sure.
Right. But it keeps me reminded, that's my outline. That's okay. I haven't done that yet.
Absolutely.
I got to get back to that. And the next one might be a quote. This is a humorous quote or a funny quote or, that's the same thing, a humorous quote or meaningful quote or something that summarizes that point that we've been working on.
Right.
Fine. Then I go back to those 4 points, then another quote.
Perfect.
Now, the thing about to remember, if you're having to, when you do PowerPoints in a meeting and you're also having to make a copy of it to give people to take out with them, hard copy, or send them afterwards in an email, you're probably being redundant. Okay. So your handout to them or sending them a summary at the end of an email should be more detailed, more nuts and bolts, elaboration, but not just replication of the PowerPoint unless it has enough teachable information in there. Okay,
got it.
What I do with the quotes and those types, I don't make copies of that for anybody.
Sure, no.
They're not going to go out and say, guess what quote I learned in that workshop.
Well, and if the quote means that much to them, they're going to write it down or they're going to do something with it on their own notes. They don't need to have a printout of that. I agree with. I'm a believer that if the PowerPoint conveys some specific level of information that's important to have in a printed form, you provide it to them afterwards. If it's just those topic outline areas or key phrases or key quotes, no, they don't need to have a copy of that unless you've added more detail to it afterwards. So, I'm with you on that.
Well, and that kind of brings up a point I wanted to make, too. I don't think a true leader's job at leading during a meeting is completed until they're back at their desks writing each person that attended that meeting, either a group email or singular email, summary email, and a thank you email. We do it with customers. When we're talking to customers or potential customers, we meet with them, send them an email, right back. Thanks for the time today. This was really interesting. I'm glad we talked about this, this, and this. We'll have your proposal by next week. Okay. Why not do the same with staff? Why? Because it extends the learning that's should be taking place in a meeting, summarizes it, puts in another learning vehicle for them, the written word versus the audio word. And the other thing, it shows appreciation for their participation.
Sure.
Or, it's not an opportunity to chastise people that happen to be mute during that meeting and say, sure would have been nice if y'all had talked, but here's a summary of what I wanted you to hear. Don't do that.
That's not good.
No,
don't
it's not good.
Okay, all right. Got
so it's one of those don'ts that you don't do. But if you start off and say, hey, really thanks for the meeting. This was a good meeting. I think it was good because we really accomplished and got information out about these 3 things, and here's a summary of those things. Thanks again. Look forward to our next meeting together.
Now I can hear through the airwaves here, I can hear all of our listeners saying, oh my gosh, that's just even more work to do after a meeting's done.
Yep.
And you're right, it is more work. But I think the message is here is that if you put that extra 5 minutes or whatever it takes to write that follow-up email, you could be saving yourself and having to repeat some of this information again, save time in a future meeting because people come in a little better prepared, a little better educated. The time saving in the long haul, I think, is there. And I think the benefit's there. It just means putting in a little extra time, after these meetings are done.
Well, think about it. It not only saves you time, but it also simply gives you a chance to re-communicate the same thing to people. We know that saying something once is not truly communications with people.
Right.
All right. Just because we said it doesn't mean people heard it. Just because we said it doesn't mean they heard it correctly. All right. with all the clutter in people's minds these days, we need to help focus them on the message we're sending, and sometimes it means repetition. So a follow-up email summarizing things gives us control of that vehicle. We can do it at our time frames, but it also reinforces the message we're trying to send. Plus, it closes the loop on those people who couldn't attend the meetings.
Sure.
That's sorry, some of you couldn't be here. Hope this summarizes for you. Please ask questions if you got any questions about it. And it gives you a little bit of ammo, quite honestly, when later on down the road somebody said, when did we talk about that? I don't remember that. Well, that was discussed at such and such meeting, and then a follow-up email.
I sent the notes out to everybody
Absolutely.
about that. Yeah, good. Well, okay. So slides, no slides, it depends on the situation. But definitely, whatever it is, there are opportunities for follow-up of sharing that same information that may have been presented on the screen or handed out or whatever it may be. Okay, we talked about this a little bit already, but the idea of allowing dialogue, questions, interruptions during a meeting. Let's say there again, you're in front of your group, you've got your agenda. I know there's the 4 topics I need to cover. We got an hour to do it. I'm going to start plowing through them and start covering these topics. Do you constantly allow the employees to give feedback, interruptions, questions, ideas? Do you try to hold those to the end? Do you do a blend of that? What makes sense in what situations? Trying to get that employee dialogue going within a meeting.
Yes, and it depends.
Wow. Okay. We're just knocking this up. You're being very efficient with our meeting time today, so that's good. Right.
Well, here's what we do. All right. Again, let the intent of the meeting guide that type of answer about participation during or at the end of a meeting.
Okay.
Remember that meetings are best when they involve dialogue, two-way exchange.
Okay.
And we're never sure that's happening if people are forced to wait to the end of a 1-hour meeting, to the last 5 minutes of a meeting, to ask questions, clarify things, or contribute new stuff. Or to challenge something.
So when the person running the meeting starts looking at their watch and say, well, we got a couple more minutes if you might have some questions.
Here? Anybody have any constant questions? Anything come up? Anybody?
That's not really going to encourage them to want to speak up at that point. Right.
The other thing is if we're trying to get input from people, invite it throughout the meeting. And in fact, prompt it. Call on people. Say, Alan, let me ask you this question. Or Alan, in a few minutes, I'm going to be asking you about such and such. Be prepared. I'm coming right to you about this.
Okay. All right.
And Alan's sweating bullets, thinking about how am I going to answer that? How am I going? And that's fine.
At least you got him alert, and you got him alert and paying attention.
And you know what? And when a person says something, no matter what it is and how screwball it might be or how far off base it might be, we always find something to compliment about it and to find value in the comment. Okay, we can go to extremes, but this is where a good leader stands out. You ask a group a question. Well, first of all, you never do that, Alan. I don't know if I made that clear.
Never ask a whole group. You ask an individual a question.
You're asking, good man. You've learned over these years. You ask an individual.
Yes.
And you start by calling the person's name. Why do you do that, Alan?
So, it's there again. It's keeping them engaged. It's feeling like they're going to give them a voice. Because if you just open it up to the whole group, you're probably going to have the same 1 or 2 people constantly.
Well, why do you call their name first before you ask a question?
To make them stay awake?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, good. Okay.
Never embarrass them.
All right.
How many times? We've all seen people who can be looking intently at you as you talk in a meeting and even nodding their heads once in a while like this. Yeah. And then you call on them with a question and say, what do you think about that, Tony? And they what? Kind of like come back to earth during that.
Okay.
And then it's embarrassing. Then they say, well, I didn't hear the question. Well, if you've been paying attention,
sure,
you would have heard the question. Yeah. That's embarrassing. So do honored by people and call their name first. Alan, let me ask you a question. You got Alan's attention by then, and then you ask an easy to answer lob type question that he can't go wrong with.
But you've got them engaged in the meeting.
That's
They're
right.
now involved.
That's
They're alert. They're staying alert. And there's a little bit of that feeling too that everybody says, well, he may call on me at any moment. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure I'm paying attention to stuff.
It's a little bit of the unknown factor, fear factor. So, and again, remember what I said. Anything that's said, you compliment it, even if it's weird.
Okay.
You toss out a question to Alan. Say, Alan, let me ask you a question. And anything you say is going to be fine, honestly. This is a tough question. If you had to pick out one thing that could be done in this department to make it a better place to work in, what would it be? And Alan says, I think we ought to change directors of this department, managers of the department, you. I mean, that to me, you ask me to be honest. Okay, I'm honest. I think you ought to go. Mm-hmm. Now, how do you find something of value in that? Well, you can say something like, Alan, of course, that's tough to hear. Thank you so much for your candor, though, because I'm sure there's other people in the room that probably feel the same thing. Well, let's find out. George, and you turn in another direction because you don't want to hear any more from Alan at that point.
Sure,
he's already on your bad side. So you go to George and say, George, what one thing would you like to see change in this department?
All right. So you've acknowledged it.
You've acknowledged
You
it.
haven't criticized it.
Haven't criticized
You've
it.
acknowledged that that person came up with a comment that was maybe a little insulting to you, or maybe,
Sure.
or somebody says, "Well, I think our entire department, we ought to secede from the hospital and go operate in a whole separate building." And
That's
all.
right.
You still find something to say. We'll say, "Okay, so you're saying in a way we need to have maybe a little more independence within our department, or find some ways to operate separately." Find that positive. Find something of a thread. But then if it is where that person is going on a negative rant,
Yep.
you divert the attention and get somebody else involved
Absolutely.
immediately after.
You divert. Anyway,
Yeah.
Negativism, weird contributions. And I've seen this happen where one guy has verbal diarrhea.
Yeah.
And he just elongates things and talks and he just doesn't stop and he keeps and he punctuates everything with and keep. How do you stop verbal diarrhea? You hold out your hand visibly and say, "Good thought. Hold that thought."
Right.
Even though he said that, "What thought?" And I was just talking. And you divert to somebody else.
Playing devil's advocate on this again.
Okay.
Going back to the whole idea of you've got your agenda. I'm a very organized leader. I know we've got 60 minutes to do this. This topic, you know what, is important, but the other two topics that followed are even more important. And I've just asked the group, okay, well, who's got some questions? John, do you got any thoughts on this? Becky, you got anything to say on this? And all of a sudden, the dialogue just keeps going and going and
Right.
going. Everybody in there's now got an idea and a topic, and they just want to keep going and going with it. I know we talked about earlier about the whole, well, we're going to table these other
Divert,
two
yeah,
things.
yeah.
But let's say this
You
is
had to
topic
deal
number
with it.
one. Topic number 2 and 3 are really important.
You have to
got
do
to get
them.
to them.
Yep.
What do you do to cut that off, to make people still, to keep that dialogue under control where it's still manageable time-wise?
You never cut off, you segue.
Okay.
Right? Now, segue, suppose that you got all these great things being said, exactly the contributions you wanted, but it's getting a little long in the tooth,
Yeah.
okay? And you're mindful of the clock. You're mindful of your commitment to them to stay within an hour, but it's a great dialogue.
Sure.
But you also got to cover the other two. So what you say is, folks, I'm hearing what you're saying, and then we're taking some visible listening notes, which I'll cover in just a few minutes, up here on the board, and this is great discussion. What I've heard you say so far is about point number 1 is this, this, and this. Are we on track with that? Did I hear you correctly? Okay, good. Because there's 2 other things that we need to really talk about in the time we have remaining.
Okay.
And I'm going to do justice to those. So let me introduce one of them by saying such and such.
All right.
And you smoothly go into it. Never cut off. Say, okay, that's enough. That's enough of that. Okay, all right, we got that covered. Number 2 is, oh, geez,
sure.
that's
Let them know that this is important. And I almost think that the mentality you want to convey is that, you know what, guys, if we had all the time in the world, I would love nothing more than sit here and keep brainstorming these ideas.
Yep.
Unfortunately, we've got these other things we've got to cover.
don't
So
have all
let's
the
try
time
to
in the world.
summarize, make sure we're all okay with what we've come up with, and now let's go tackle the other ones.
But I always leave it open and say, is this something we need to bring up at another meeting as well? That's
Okay,
what we
that's
talked
a
about
good
today.
idea. Yep.
Let them know that if there's more to come, we'll have an opportunity to do that.
Good, I like that.
Okay.
All right, the last item I've got, maybe the little more of the controversial one and a little more timely in the last couple years. Mobile devices,
Oh, gee.
phones, tablets, iPads during a meeting. Let's say there again, you're leading your first department team meeting. You come in and half the people around the room have their iPads up and they keep tapping and fiddling and touching. What's your take on that? I mean, is that something where we need to have more control over that? Is that something where we don't want to limit their ability to do what they want to do during the meeting, but yet we don't also know how they're spending their time on that? It's a tricky thing. So I get a lot of questions about it from people.
All right.
Should I outlaw phones and iPads out of meetings or not?
I hate the word outlaw.
Okay.
I hate the word banning.
All right.
All right. I think dissuading, discouraging, or setting a culture that says this is how we communicate in our meetings.
All right.
And it doesn't include communicating with everybody outside the meeting room by
Okay.
texting. You don't have to say, all right, put your phones on hold, no texting today, folks, and so on and so forth. And yet you've got somebody using an iPad to legitimately take notes
sure.
during the meeting.
Yep.
Which might be, okay, well, gee, that's just like somebody taking notes. Mm-hmm. So where do you draw the line? Or somebody else saying, well, he cut me off from using my BlackBerry over here, but they get to write their notes or whatever over there.
That's the tricky part.
So I think what you do is simply say, folks, the purpose of this meeting is for dialogue amongst ourselves. Mm-hmm. Okay? So I'm asking that you don't engage in dialogue with anybody outside of here electronically.
Okay. So you're putting that parameter on it. If
Absolutely.
you're using the device to communicate outside of this meeting and to divert attention from you,
And that
we
includes
want you to
checking
stop.
emails.
Yeah,
that
we want
includes
you to
checking
stop.
emails or texting.
Yep.
Those two are very offensive because it means there's no such thing as multitasking.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that until Marilyn Monsant said that in the paper one time. I believe her. She's a brainy person.
Okay.
There's no such thing truly as multitasking. Right.
Well, that's true.
And the fact is that if a person's texting, they're not listening and contributing in the meeting.
Just because it's happening at the same time doesn't mean you're multitasking.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And the fact is they're not doing justice to either.
Sure.
Okay? If I devote my attention to my texting to get it right and be responsive, I'm not hearing what the leader of this meeting said.
Now, the challenge where that gets a little fuzzy is, I bring my iPad to my meeting and I like to take notes on there because I'm trying to get away from using paper and pen.
Sure.
Because I normally can't write my own handwriting. I sit there and type.
Yep.
Typing, unfortunately, on a device like this is not always the easiest in the world. So sometimes I find myself having to go back and fix typos and changing things, which means every time I'm doing that, I'm not hearing what the person's saying.
That's exactly right. Because that's a concentration of your time and attention there.
Yeah, but at the same
time, I've tried to encourage you to use a pen. Like I have right in front of me right now. Look at that. See,
I look at it. It's
soft tip stylus pen on your iPad.
Trying,
that
and
works.
I will get there soon.
That's like a pencil being taken notes in a meeting.
What I found my challenge is I spend more time during the meeting getting my notes right. Which, granted, after the meeting that helps tremendously. My notes are nice and organized, and I can act on them. However, I don't feel like I'm getting the 100% attention during the meeting that I need to be paying because I'm trying to work on typing and getting my stuff together. So it's a challenge.
I know you say this was a tough one to bring up, and it's a little challenging, and I'll give you the direct feedback on it.
Sure.
In your meetings that you hold, when you are typing on your iPad, when you're the leader of the meeting, is distracting to other people.
Okay.
And it sends the wrong message like, I'm not really listening to you, I'm recording whatever, or I wonder what he's typing there. He's saying that I said that, that type of thing.
But couldn't you argue the same thing if somebody's taking notes on a notepad?
Sure.
Same thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. That can be done.
What are they writing? Are they writing good things, bad things?
But I guarantee you that sitting up there writing, kind of in vision of people, writing a few notes, stopping, still looking at the person, jotting a word rather than typing text in full sentences correctly edited. That's a much more time-consuming, attention-gathering practice.
Right.
Okay. What it sends the message to the group is, I'm distracted from you while you're talking. I'm doing something else. So therefore, what you're talking about is not nearly as important as you think it is.
So in other words, tablets or iPads, as long as people are writing on them, you're saying is okay.
I know that sounds bland, but yeah.
But if they're typing with a keypad or a keyboard or whatever, that's distracting.
I think the typing, only because it smacks of having to devote more attention to creating a message, perfecting a message, or doing texting with people, or checking emails. Writing with a stylus on a piece of paper, pencil on a piece of paper, or a stylus on an iPad is very closely the same.
It's seen as a very focused task.
Yeah.
From people as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. I know there's some people out there that have tried or talked about the idea of saying, don't bring your cell phones in, don't even pull them out of your bags.
Yeah. I don't go there.
I do think that's a little restrictive in a workplace. There are situations where we have kids, we have other things. If somebody's trying to text message us, let us know our kid just got ran to the hospital. I kind of want to be able to see that and have that. I'm sure any employee feels the same way.
Or in our business, there's a customer rights right there.
Absolutely.
To be tended to.
But there again, to even know if a customer's writing and all that, we got to be checking our email, which means we might get distracted with other things. So I think it's just setting the ground rules for everybody. Say, listen, we know these devices are important for communication, but I like how you phrased it earlier. We want you to limit any communications outside of this room.
Yep.
Unless it's an emergency situation that you get notified about.
That's right. Here's one of the techniques. I just thought about this. How about if it's an hour meeting, every 20 minutes or so, say, folks, check your emails real quick.
Oh, that's
2
good.
minutes.
Just give them the time to
Don't respond. Just check your emails. If there's anything you have to take care of right now, step out of the room and take care of it. That's right. And come back in and rejoin us.
Otherwise, shut it back off or put it in your notes mode and let's keep going.
That's a great way to limit it.
Really
limit it, but give them the same access that they're craving.
Letting them know they're not going to have to go for an hour and a half without checking email if they're expecting something, but it's not going to be every 30 seconds they want to pull it out and check it out.
Well, and some people go through withdrawal, if they have to go an hour without checking it. So don't let them do that. And honestly, if they're expecting an email from a client or whatever, any time now, they need that opportunity to check it.
Sure.
But control it.
Yep.
Okay.
Very good. Well, those were my items I had on my list. Dad, are there some things you feel like I left off, some things that are just really critical, kind of operational do's and don'ts for a staff meeting or team meeting environment?
Well, I don't know. Let me check first with our engineer here.
Yes.
Jay, how long have we been going here? Hour?
Not quite an hour, he said.
Okay, well, I guess this is our own hour meeting. Huh?
Well, this is our 60-minute podcast. So,
is it?
Not to rush you up, but you got about a minute and a half. No, we don't.
Maybe
have
look at my notes. I got a page of notes here.
We don't have a time limit on this. So,
a couple of notes, and most of them you've already talked about. Okay, I like visible listening when you're working with a group. Visible listening means using a flip chart or whiteboard or something in front of people that writes down contributions made, because it says to people, I heard you. Did I hear it correctly? Because they can read it. And you know what? Because I've written, I've got to do something with it.
Sure.
All right? Rather than simply saying, oh, good idea, Alan. Okay, anybody else? And Alan's like, did that mean anything at all?
It is a good visual cue. And I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there running meetings that may put these things up on the board and not do anything with it.
Yep.
But I think the message you're sending better than anything else is, I put it up on the board. I want to make sure everybody else in the room saw it.
Yep.
And even if all of us walk out of this room with that bullet point still fresh in our brain because we visibly saw it,
right,
we're going to pay it more attention. So.
Well, that's why in some groups, like focus groups and so on, you have a recorder, you know? And last night, for example, that focus group I did again, at the end of the session, I asked Peter, the recorder, the vice president's organization, said, Peter, how about summarize for us the 5 main things we talked about and contributed in this session tonight? And he went through it, and then we checked out with that. Is that what? Did we hear you correctly? Was this good or not?
Sure.
And they got to reinforce it. And one guy said, yeah, but you forgot about such and such. He said, that's right. Okay, put it back down. What a great message to send to people like, we heard you. And it's important what you said, and we recorded it.
Well, I think recording on probably not a weekly staff meeting type of situation as far as actual recording, writing down every single word necessarily, but making sure you got those key points. If you've got a really critical brainstorming session or just a really, really key meeting, I think even audio recording it, just so you have an audio recording in case you can play back and listen, is perfectly fine to do.
That would work as well.
I would recommend not going too overboard with the documentation of every single word if it's more of a routine weekly huddle type of thing.
Sure.
Also.
Well, that kind of goes along with that. As a leader in a meeting setting, you never want to do anything that's distractive to everybody else in the meeting on personal behaviors. Whether it's flipping a pen or magic mark in the air. Sound familiar, Alan?
Yeah, a little bit.
It distracts attention, waiting for that thing to drop, and that type of thing. What it basically says is I'm impatient, get on with it. Let's get this over with. Let's get on to something else. I don't have time for this. The other thing, too, is as people, you were asking about the typing on your iPad a minute ago as you're doing right now. One of the things that you could blend together the two is when people, rather than writing on a flip chart, the visible listening, you say to somebody, oh, wait, that's a great idea. Let me type that in real quick. I want to make sure we don't lose that. And then you go back to your iPad at the end of the meeting and summarize it to people verbally. All it's doing is replacing a flip chart.
Okay.
With something that's comfortable for you to use.
Got it.
But it also kind of gives permission to do that during the meeting. So never do anything personally distractive to people in a meeting. Nothing drives me crazier than somebody constantly checking their watch.
Oh, sure.
During the meeting. It makes me want to say, even if it's a participant and I'm leading the meeting, so I'll turn to that person and say, I'll be finished in just a minute. I know you're concerned about time, and they don't even realize they're doing it sometimes. But the message is send everybody else like, I've lost interest in this thing. Okay. Remember that some of the best meeting structures are those that change frequently.
Oh, okay.
Now, switch gears every now and then. If your people have gotten used to the fact that our meetings are always an hour, they're always a sit-down meeting, our culture says that people drag into meetings late, but they're never brought up to speed with what we've been talking about, that some people don't have to attend, and that what we come in here for is to listen to Alan drone on about whatever we need to hear that day, and then we're out of here. Well, break it up. Sure. In advance of the meeting, a couple of days in, I know this is one more thing to do, but write everything that you want to communicate to them in bullet point form, send it to everybody and say, this is what I want you to know coming into the meeting. And then instead of rehashing everything and going all through that with them, like the topics and all that, but give them detail. Then someone says, I hope you read what I sent to you. It's certainly intent that you would, and that's a way of communicating. So are there any questions about what I sent you? You can deal with it by exception. Then you say, okay, we got those cleared up. Good. Keep handling for that because that's what we're going to talk about. Now let's talk about our problem to solve for the day. Sure. And you get them involved in a discussion, problem solving discussion. Break it into small groups. Change the format of how you conduct a meeting. Have somebody else conduct and facilitate the meeting. Or it might be the fact that instead of an hour meeting, you surprise them and say, guess what? This has been a great meeting, and we're going to stop where we're ahead. This meeting's over.
So kind of just keeping people on their toes a little bit, keeping them alert, keeping them not getting so settled into a certain format and regiment with this.
That's exactly
It's good. As people don't come into it dragging and just already having this sense of dread of what it's going to be because it's been the same way every single week for 5 years now. So
I think you always ought to try to personalize your dialogue with people in the meetings. As we said before, when you're asking questions, call the person
using
name
their
first,
names.
direct it to the person. Always direct questions to a person. It's much easier to get a response from an Alan by calling Alan and asking him a question that cannot be answered with yes or no, than to look at the whole group of 30 people and say, what do y'all think about our department this week?
Do you think the department's going okay?
You get silent. Everything going okay?
Yep.
Oh, okay, good. Next topic,
Right.
and on you go.
Yeah, it's tough.
So
it's tough. Anything else you want to cover? I think we covered a good bit there. So
Alan, I am just so full of ideas that it would take 5 hours to go through. But you know what? I think we keep people hanging, okay?
I'll tell you what, Tony. Those are some great ideas. I would love nothing more than to keep talking about those ideas for the next hour or so. But you know what? We've got to move on and do a few things here at the end. I'll tell you what we're going to do, though. We're going to make sure next recording we have, we're going to try to pick back up on some of these. We're going to see where we go from there.
I feel real good about that, Alan. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I'm being an effective leader. So perfect.
Well, it does work, doesn't it?
It does.
Really, because I don't feel shunned at all. I feel like
this is a great conversation. We just, fortunately, we got to keep moving on a little bit. A couple more things we got to do here. This has been talking all about leading well when people meet. We're just trying to talk more about the mechanics, the real do's and don'ts, the operational things when running a meeting, because we all know those meetings are extremely important. People find them useful for the effective communications in an organization. And we realize not every leader out there is the best presenter or the best talker in front of a group. So some of these things may take a little adjustment. Some of these things may not be the perfect fit for you. And hopefully we gave you enough options to look at in all those situations that you can make a style or fit that works best for you. Yep. But you do need to keep in mind how others are going to get the information that you convey in those meetings, how it's portrayed, how you look when you're doing it, how the information comes across. And really, the biggest thing I heard that I hope people take away from this is closing that loop afterwards. Just there's a lot that can be done after a meeting. Just because the meeting's done, you hit that hour mark, doesn't mean you walk out the door and just forget about everything that happened the last hour. Yep. Keep it in front of people. Let them thinking about it. Let them follow up on it. And I think some of those post-meeting communications are extremely important.
Yeah. So. Well, as we conclude, I'd like to say a thank you to a special person, if you don't mind. And it's the person I mentioned before, and that's Major Scott Coffey.
Yes, that's right.
He's in our military, Army, to be exact. And he served several tours overseas.
Yes.
He is a major, which is to his credit. And he has taught some leadership sessions in Washington lately and other types of training he's been through.
Right.
And he advocates listening to our own MESH, the Leadership GPS
with his
folks.
Yeah,
That's exactly. So, Scott, I know you'll listen to this. Thank you so much. We're proud of you. This is the day after Veterans Day.
Sure.
And we appreciate everything that you and your troops have done. And come home soon.
Well, just a special thanks to all the veterans out there, and to Scott, a future veteran. We want to thank you already for the work you're doing right now as well. So thanks to everybody out there. Thanks also to our sponsor, Pinecrest Independent Living Community. Look them up online. Find out more about this great facility. I'm sure you give them a call, set up a time to go visit if you have any interest or in the area. They'd love to show you around. Again, live the life you deserve at Pinecrest. TheMesh.tv, go listen to all the other shows we have to listen to. If you've got a long weekend and you got some time to kill, you can go all the way back to the beginning of Leadership GPS episode number 1.
Yes.
Cue them up. Just set up a whole playlist and listen to all the episodes back to back. I guarantee you that is an exciting weekend.
It's a leadership training course. It really is. Perfect. And each one gets progressively better, don't you think?
I think
we're not even at our peak yet.
I think we're getting more and more into our groove every single time we go along. So that's good. But we do encourage you, go back, listen to some of the topics we've talked about. There's been a lot about communication in our show, because we do realize, I think we could both agree, communication is the number one thing a good leader has to do.
Absolutely.
And there's so many other episodes where we've talked about different aspects of communication. So feel free to go listen to those. We have other business-related shows. Stepping Up Service has to do with the world of customer service and delivering excellent service to your customers or clients. We've got CapsCast, which is a little more on the healthcare side, may not be applicable to everybody out there. But those of you in the healthcare arena dealing with the patient experience survey, known as CAPS, mandated by CMS and the government, we have a show dealing with that every month as well. So a lot of things, and then there's some other shows that are not business related at all, just a lot of fun to listen to. So check it out at themesh.tv. You can drop us an email with any questions, suggestions you may have at info@themesh.tv. Yes.
No, go ahead and finish up. I was just raising my hand over here so everybody knows.
Oh, good. Okay. Tony's raising his hand. We'll get to him in just a moment. And again, on the website, themesh.tv, there is a contact us form you can fill out and get a hold of us if you have any thoughts, ideas, suggestions, anything at all about this show or any other shows we have.
You mentioned patient surveys a minute ago, and I'm thinking that one of the upcoming topics that you and I ought to talk about is how to use survey data of employees in an effective way, and other ways other than doing surveys that get at the same stuff.
Great. Good. I like
different
that.
message to people.
So providing the kind of using the feedback you gain from a survey process or some sort of dialogue process and using it effectively.
Surveying, how to use the information effectively, how to not to over-survey people.
Sure.
How to get the same information other ways like focus groups and things like that, or one-to-one dialogue, or other creative electronic input sources like we have developed at the Jackson Group called Employee Voice, and really exciting stuff. I think we ought to talk about just those vehicles because doing surveys is very much a part of the leadership culture.
Tony, that is an absolutely great idea. If you can just let me pause, if you can just let me pause for a second, I'm going to make sure I get this down. I'm going to type this on my iPad right now.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
I know you're
great
not
idea.
distracted now. I know you're not distracted.
So I'm going to stop and type.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, I'm typing.
Okay, go ahead and type the thing.
I'm typing. There we go. I've got it typed now. Now I'm back to your full attention. So great. All right. Well, this has been Leadership GPS. I'm Alan Jackson. This is Tony Jackson with me, both with the Jackson Group and Tony specifically also with the Drive Leadership Program. Check us out online at thejacksongroup.com or driveleadership.com. Both websites are connected together. You can find out more about what both of us do day to day. And we hope to hear from you soon. And thanks for listening to us on The Mesh.
We appreciate it very much. And I'm thinking, Alan, you and I ought to start signing off our Mesh podcast here with the same way I sign off my emails to the people that I work with in leadership consultations through Drive Leadership. Lead well, ... today.
Lead well today.
Today.
Got
That's
it.
right. Okay.
Sounds great. Okay. Take care, everyone. Thanks a lot.
You've been listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Check us out online at themesh.tv. Discover other network shows and give us feedback on what you just heard.